Maverick News. The world is watching. In a universe full of ideas, we draw lightness from the dark to a place where opposites attract. Right meets left, positive touches negative, sparking an explosion of truth. Because politics makes strange bedfellows.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to Strange Bedfellows, episode 25. I'm Lori Spencer, along with my friend Rick Walker there in Canada. How's it going, Rick?
Just fine. Great to be back with you.
Thank you so much for joining us. We're happy to have Michael Krupa back on the show tonight. We've been trying to get him back. Last time he was on was, I think, episode 6 back in August of last year, our friend in Poland. You might remember Michael if you missed that show. He is a delight. He is a Polish historian and commentator, currently completing his PhD on American Paleoconservatism. And I believe as of next week, we will be allowed to refer to him as Dr. Mike, but not yet. Next week. He's also the host of the Votum TV podcast. He writes a lot and talks a lot about the history of Poland, which is fascinating. His work has appeared in a lot of outlets, including the American Conservative and Consortium News. On his Votum TV channel, he's interviewed some of the best. He's talked to Judge Andrew Napolitano, Ray McGovern, our friend Scott Ritter, Maxime Bernier of the People's Party of Canada, Colonel Douglas McGregor, Larry Johnson, and my friend Ron Paul, among many others. And tonight, we're going to be talking about his new book, which is coming out next month, February 20th, I believe. The name of the book is The End of Poland. There's a cheery subject. We're also going to talk to him about what's happening now in the Russia-Ukraine war. We're going to talk about Elon Musk's visit to Auschwitz this week, the trucker convoy heading to Texas, pledging to take our border back. Yeehaw. Honk, honk. And we're going to cover some Canada stuff because Mike lived in Canada for many years. We're going to talk about the Edmonton City Hall incident this week and Tucker Carlson's Canada tour and a whole lot more. So without further ado, let's bring in Mike Krupa. Mike, it's great to see you again. Good evening or good afternoon or whatever the hell time it is in Poland. How you doing?
Howdy. Good to see you again. It's good afternoon here so far. Good to be back on the program. Good to see the two of you.
Good to
Wonderful.
see you too, Mike.
Where do we start, brother? There's so much to talk about. It's been a while since we last connected. I'd like to start with your PhD. How soon can we call you Dr. Mike?
Well, the Dr. Mike program, which will be filling in for Dr. Phil. No, I'm kidding. No, I'm not writing in psychology. My PhD thesis is strictly in political science. And I will be defending my thesis on February 5th at the Cardinal Stefan Wyszyński University in Warsaw. And by the way, it's a public defense of my thesis. So if anybody from the world wants to come, you can come. There's going to be treats after on me. So if you want to find out where you can come and even ask me questions, just DM me or email me, and I'll be happy to help out. So after February 5th, you can legally call me doctor. Right now, I'm sort of like a doctor in spe. So doctor soon to be.
I'm so proud of you going for that PhD, brother. You know, you're
Thank
never
you.
too late to get your advanced degree in life. I admire
Well,
that.
it's there was this meme flying around because I have to admit it did take me some time to finally bring this to a close. But the meme said, "Never ask a PhD candidate when will you finish your PhD." That's one of those things you never ask. You can ask somebody who's studying for a master's degree, but PhDs are one of those esoteric things that it'll come, and when it'll come, you'll know when it'll come. Just don't ask me when.
How many years has it taken?
Well, since I started writing, believe it or not, it's going to be 11 years. 11 years. Now, I have to admit, I had periods where I just couldn't write because there's so much going on in my life, moving back to Poland, getting married, buying a house, and so on, setting up a family. But thanks to my wife, and my PhD thesis on the first page is dedicated to my wife, Kate. So, honey, if you're listening, thank you once again for the help, because her editorial work and her motivation were the crucial factors that allowed me to finish this. Because at some point, I was asking myself the question, who the hell wants to read about paleoconservatism in Poland anyway, right? Why am I doing this? But then that other angel came on my shoulder and said, do it, like Arnold, Schwarzenegger.
Yeah, see,
So-
that's where I was confused, because I assumed this book would be your new book. You would think that would be something Americans would also like to read, or American conservatives would like to read, but it's not in our language yet. Are there plans to put the new book into the English language?
I am considering translating the PhD itself, because the book that you mentioned is a different project, but the PhD itself, I do plan on publishing it in Poland in the form of a book. And I think with collaboration of some of the paleocons, or what's left of them, because they're an older generation in the United States, including obviously Pat Buchanan and the man who actually invented the term paleoconservative. He's currently the editor-in-chief of Chronicles magazine, one Professor Paul Gottfried. So if Paul deems it sufficient and good enough to be sort of set on the stage of American research on American paleoconservatism, I'll definitely consider translating it into English and publishing it in some American, or at least English language outlet.
So let's talk about the new book, titled "The End of Poland." Is it the end of Poland? Spoiler alert! Don't ruin the end for anything.
Maybe frame that question a little bit further. And does the title of the book, the subject matter, relate to your new government? Because I think we really need to acknowledge that since we last spoke, you have a brand new government that's sort of at odds with each other, because you have a president and a prime minister that really don't see eye to eye on things, plus political prisoners. You have things going on with your state media. That has to play into everything you just wrote about.
Yeah, well, we were sort of prophetic when we came up with the idea of writing the book, because I'm one of the three co-authors of the book. The other two co-authors are Wojciech Sumliński. He is one of Poland's most legendary investigative journalists. You could sort of compare him to, I don't know, Seymour Hersh in the United States. I mean, this is a man who's seen a lot, who's uncovered a lot, and he's just one of those old school, with coffee stains on his papers type of guy. Although he doesn't smoke. I always tell him you should start smoking as a proper investigative journalist, but he's too good of a man. So Wojciech Sumliński is one of the co-authors. The other co-author is one Major Tomasz Budzyński. Major Tomasz Budzyński was an officer in the Polish equivalent of the FBI. So in Poland, it's called the ABW, the Internal Security Agency. And he was actually the head of one of its largest field offices in Lublin, responsible, among other things, for counterterrorism activity and also operations on the Polish-Ukrainian border. So he went into retirement, and he still wanted to do, his service as a patriot. He set up a company that publishes these books, and we came up with the idea of writing a book, which basically, because what's the book about? Maybe I'll delve into that without any sort of spoilers. We understood that whatever government comes after the last government in October will probably continue on the same lines, the general trajectory of foreign policy. And we were completely right, because Donald Tusk was in Kiev this week. He was bowing again to Zelensky, saying we have to help Zelensky, bring the money and the weapons and so on. So there's no difference in terms of foreign policy, at least as it relates to Ukraine. So we knew that from the start. And what we wanted to do with this book is, because Poland is a product of geopolitics, and we are in a very volatile geopolitical environment, or neighborhood, so to say, this book highlights, through discussions and expertise of people from the West, people from the East who we interviewed, and our own insight, the true position of Poland in the current geopolitical turbulence. There's a lot of so-called experts in Poland whose, expertise basically comes down to repeating all the talking points of CNN or Anna Applebaum. That's what apparently makes them an expert. But they sound cool. They go on all the Polish mainstream television stations. They repeat the crap. Russians are using chips from laundry machines, stuff like that. And it turns out after a couple of months that nothing of what these guys predicted happened. But they're still given, the public forum to speak and spout their BS. So we said to ourselves, we know a lot of experts. I mean, we're very knowledgeable on the issue, especially Major Budzinski. Why don't we write a book that'll be a counter to the BS that's been spouted ever since February 24, 2022?
And that's the new government. They actually make reference to or call, some of their prominent government members a cabinet of experts or a panel of experts or something like that. Yeah. So is that why you're referencing this as sort of a counterbalance to that?
In a way, yes. And in a counterbalance to the former regime also, because as I said, the trajectory of foreign policy substantially has not changed and will not change. So, and let's not forget the former prime minister, whose reign ended in October, was actually at one point an economic advisor to the current prime minister. So it's an evolving door, right? Or a revolving door, as they say in the States. These guys all know each other. I'm pretty sure many of them, after the parliamentary deliberations, and they sit down and drink vodka together. There is no main difference. I mean, there is no substantial difference, because I think I mentioned this on the first time I was on the program. They both come from the same, what I call, rotten fruit of, and this might sound shocking to a lot of Western listeners, of the so-called Solidarity Revolution. There are two factions from the Solidarity Revolution. And if you look at the Solidarity Revolution in the 80s, as to a large extent, I'm not saying, 100%. There was a lot of good people in Solidarity, true patriots who thought they were really fighting for an independent Poland. But Solidarity, in many respects, can be called the first successful American color revolution in Eastern Europe. I mean, the aim was to weaken the Soviet Union. The money from the CIA was being funneled. Director Casey was all in on supporting Solidarity. I mean, the printing press was all supported by Langley and so on. So in a way, it can be considered, to a large extent, a color revolution. So in a nutshell, the former prime minister represents the right wing of the Solidarity movement, and the current prime minister represents the left wing of the Solidarity movement. But it's still
again, I could just stop for just a moment.
Mm-hmm.
The current system, or the result of the Solidarity movement, is a Poland today that in many respects reflects sort of the corporatocracy that we have here in Canada, the United States, and Western countries. And I guess that would be something you would point to as proof that this Solidarity movement was really something that was fueled by and maybe even directed to some degree by the West and the United States. Fair?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, we're seeing it on a smaller scale in Poland, obviously, because we're not that big of a country. But the main trends are there. I mean, if you look at the program of the new government, we have to make up a few years of the woke, trajectory that you have in Canada and the States in the last, let's say, 20 years, especially the last decade. So the new government says, so right now we have to catch up with our patrons in the West. So we have to liberalize the abortion laws. They're talking already about a bill criminalizing hate speech. So no criticism of, LGBT, trans, and so on. That's going to be made apparently illegal. They've even gone as far as proposing a bill, and I think this has already passed by the uber woke Minister of Education, that within 2 or 3 years, I think they're going to start at the elementary level. Students are no longer going to be assigned homework. So let's make the youth even dumber. The reason for this that they're giving is because, students don't have time after school to spend with their family, to go outside and so on. Let's be frank. The majority of kids, they spend their time on this after school, not with family, not with friends, which just makes them more dumber. They're TikToking all along. And if we need something in Poland, it's actually obviously a fair distribution. I mean, you don't want to kill the kids with tons of homework, but I mean, I can't imagine anybody in my time, or I'm guessing in your time, saying, hey, let's make homework illegal because it puts too much stress on the kids. What? They want to make it a stress-free environment. So we know where that's heading, right? This is wokedom, preparing the kids to basically, they're not telling them how to think. They're teaching them what to think, and that is a major difference.
Right. So you say that they have some catching up to do, but it seems like, you had the Law and Justice Party, which, and I'm not so intimately knowledgeable about Poland and the politics there to really fully understand what that party is. But it strikes me that party was more of a populist, conservative type of party. And yet, we see the rise of populism over here. You're just kind of pushing that to the side now, or the voters have decided, and you're bringing in a more progressive government under, Donald Tusk, but still have your president, who is aligned more with the populists. So to me, catching up, it seems like they're sort of maybe way ahead of the curve, and now going into the next cycle. It's very strange to see Poland sort of out of sync and maybe coming back into sync with everything else going on over here. Because I think we're about to see more populism and less progressivism over here.
Well, here's the thing. First of all, if you look at the policies pursued by Law and Justice because they were in power for 2 terms from 2015 to October 2023, a lot of what they did, and they were obviously portrayed in the West as conservative, ultra-nationalist, and so on. That's BS. They were populist and conservative and nationalist in name only. Insofar as you consider Lindsey Graham a conservative or a populist, that's how Law and Justice was populist, literally. So from the outside, you can meme Lindsey Graham and take some words that he says out of context and you say, oh, he's a Reagan, Republican, he's really hardcore, he's extreme right or something. That's the exact same perception when it comes to Law and Justice. I mean, I could go into details right now, but the fact that, I'm just going to give you one example. The fact that Law and Justice was in favor of the so-called European Union Green Deal, which aims to decarbonize all of European economies up until 2050, which basically means you're killing off all the mines in Poland, especially in Silesia, which is suicide for our economy. That was Law and Justice, the supposedly anti-globalist, nationalist, conservative, anti-Semitic, blah, 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 blah party. Mm-hmm. It's complete BS. They sold a lot of older, because the general voter of Law and Justice is usually a person over 60 who survived the communist years, probably attends church once a week, watches the state media, considers it very reliable, and usually doesn't have access to social media or dissident voices. So whatever the television tells them, and unfortunately, a lot of times the pastor at the local church who gets money for the government to, renovate the church roof, for example, they'll tell you vote for Law and Justice because Jesus Christ wants you to vote for Law and Justice. And that's what unfortunately happens. But last time, the liberals managed to mobilize much better than Law and Justice. And despite the fact that Law and Justice actually won the elections, they got more votes, but that didn't give them a majority in parliament this time. So that was the difference. And there were some futile attempts to create a minority government, but that went nowhere.
And that's because of the way that the seats or whatever break down.
Yes.
Right.
Yeah, exactly. You have to have a majority. I think, don't quote me on this, I think it's 231 to have a majority in the Polish parliament. So they didn't get the 230. And they were just under. There were attempts of buying off some new MPs, but they told them to go screw themselves, basically, because nobody wanted to touch Law and Justice after 2 years. And in a way, it was a sort of, in Poland we call it being tired with the material. So it was zmęczenie materiału, where basically after almost a decade of them ruling, people just wanted to see new faces. So some people wanted to see new faces. Some people wanted to replace them because they weren't conservative enough. Some people wanted to replace them because they were too conservative, apparently. And that's where you have this new governing coalition, which, I remind people, is actually made up of 3 parties. It's not just one party. They had to actually unite 3 parties to beat Law and Justice. It's the civic platform of current Prime Minister Donald Tusk, and former Prime Minister at the same time, because he was twice Prime Minister already. The Peasants' Party, so basically that's the Farmers' Party in Poland, or the Establishment Farmers' Party, PSL. And then you have the left, basically called the left, Lewica in Poland. These are the uber wokesters. So even in terms of some of their ideas, even Donald Tusk, who's fairly liberal on most issues, is even trying to, tame them down because they really want to go full uber woke in the next year. Gay marriage, abortion up until the time of birth, no homework, total subservience to the European Union, stuff like that. So even Tusk is saying, hey guys, no, slow down. We're not going to go that fast. So in a way, he's stopping the French Revolution, so to say, in Poland. But what's interesting, I read a headline yesterday that starting September, and this just goes to show you the paradoxes of the situation. Starting September, Ukrainian citizens who are on the territory of Poland, especially the ones who escaped Ukraine, being real refugees or not after February 24, 2022, are no longer going to be eligible for social services, the child allowance, which basically is 800 zlotys a month. And that's being liquidated by the liberal government. It wasn't liquidated by the so-called nationalist government, which actually gave the child care benefit to all Ukrainians who came in. It's being liquidated by the liberal government. So that's a good thing in a way. I mean, they should have done that earlier. But obviously the real reason why they're doing it, and this has been made clear by some of them in Parliament, is the Ukrainians are making it very clear they don't have the manpower right now in the East. So they're appealing to all the other European governments, especially the ones that are holding a large amount of Ukrainian men, to start sending these guys back to Ukraine. And this was made clear that they're going to be recruiting them from abroad also. So a lot of people were asking, well, how are you going to do that? What, you're going to send, the Azov battalion to catch these guys on the streets of Poland? Well, no, you take the incentives away. So if you take the child benefit away, if you take any sort of refugee benefits away, well, they're going to have to think twice about where they're going to go. And if the same situation is happening in, Poland and Germany, then they're going to have to think twice about, whether they should come back to Ukraine. And once they cross that border in Western Ukraine, it's going to be very easy to find them because, you're crossing the border. You're not jumping over the barbed wire fence like, God rest his soul, Gonzalo Lira tried to Hungary in June. That was a sad story. So that's, I think, despite the fact that it's a good thing, but the reasons are fairly nefarious because they just want to send them back to the meat grinder and basically make sure that these guys are going to die a very agonizing death on the Eastern Front. So.
Needlessly, I might add.
Yeah, unfortunately. So that's our last couple of months in a nutshell. And our book is going to be dealing with the current geopolitical situation in the world as it relates to Poland. And we have a whole pool of experts and friends from East and West who also contribute to the book. It's sort of an interview type book, plus the analysis that we give ourselves to make up, in summary, a book that I think will be, I hope, read by even people who are up there in the government to at least see a different point of view on what's happening.
So why do you think that it's the end of Poland? Is it because you don't see a viable political path back to prosperity, or is it because the parties that are being offered are all sort of offering the same basic you can get Coke or you can get Pepsi.
Yeah.
Which is only cola, no 7-Up.
Well, Scott Ritter would say Diet Coke also. Let's not forget. Which I actually tried this week after a long hiatus and actually said, this is pretty damn good, actually. But getting back to your question, Rick, I think it's three factors. My personal opinion, because the subtitle of the book is How Much Time Do We Have Left? In my opinion, is we have 8 to 10 years to save this country. And the reasons are as follows. Poland is tied very closely to the neoliberal model that's currently dying basically in the West, but it's still there. So we are fundamentally a service economy that doesn't produce anything of any significance anymore. We're a service economy mostly for Western corporations that find cheap labor here. And the Western neoliberal model is falling. And that is obviously killing off the potential, the geopolitical potential, the economic potential of all the Western countries. I mean, we're all seeing it in the West. Yeah. So that if we don't change course on that, and the government in power right now just wants to double down, that's not going to help. So that's one issue, the economic issue that'll sort of, make Poland go away because it'll weaken us. The second issue is cultural. In all the major Polish cities right now, within the last year, I think the statistics are from last year, 2022. There are basically no kids being born. The young couples right now that are not even married, it's usually a model of he works at a corporation, she works at a corporation. They took out a huge loan to buy an apartment, say in the center of Warsaw. They have to have 2 Mercedes or 2 BMWs to drive to work, 10 meters from home, but they have to have it. And they have a cat, they have a dog, and they can have kids, but they don't want to have kids. It's a conscious choice. And whereas the problem of people not having kids because they naturally can't have kids is obviously is there and always was there. Right now, we're seeing a phenomenon. It's obviously a phenomenon, again, seeing all across the Western world where the women are saying, especially the women, I don't want to have kids. I want to be a woman. I want to be free. I want to realize my dreams. I want to work. So the number of children being born in the major Polish cities has fallen rapidly. Mm-hmm. It's not so bad in the provinces because people who live in the rural areas of Poland, especially in southeastern Poland, what we call Polish Texas in a way, people still there, you can say there's a conservative culture of, God-fearing, hardworking, family of at least 2, if not 3 kids, and then the dog and the cat, and not the other way around. So that's the cultural issue. And then we have the third issue, which I think is very important and tied to the second one. It's demographics and the ethnic composition of Poland. We have 3 million Ukrainians in Poland. I think a little bit more, but that number does not seem to be winding down in the next couple of years. If we're going to see anything, I think we're going to see more Ukrainians coming into Poland. Now, the interesting thing is, the arguments that the liberals make for open borders in Poland is sort of like the same ones that they're making in the West. We're having a demographic crisis. We have to bring in, these Ukrainians. They're going to make up for the demographic crisis. Well. It turns out Ukrainian women, once they get a taste of, neoliberal corporatist freedom, they don't want to have kids.
They don't like it.
They don't. They want to party. They want to have fun. They want to work. They want to drive the Mercedes with, Boris or Andre or whatever. It's the same cultural trends. And I mentioned at the beginning of our conversation how sort of Poland has to make up the wokeness agenda because we sort of fallen back, so we have to accelerate right now. Well, in Ukraine, we're driving at 50 kilometers an hour in terms of acceleration. They're driving 100 kilometers an hour. I mean, there was a petition in the middle of a war signed by, I think, 25,000 signatories that Ukraine should legalize gay marriage.
Yes.
In the middle of a war. Wow. Priorities, guys.
Priorities.
And apparently, there's LGBT fighters in Ukraine. There's the LGBT parade, the gay parade.
Their spokesperson for the Ukrainian military is Sarah Ashton Cirillo.
The guy or the girl. I forgot what he is truly.
I don't know.
Whatever. He's mixed up. He's a Marvel superhero in a way, I guess. But he's all over the place.
Your guess is as good as mine.
Exactly. So the Ukrainians coming into Poland, they're not going to make up the demographic. And let's not forget, there was a very, very important report by a professor from the University of Warsaw. He does these annual reports of sort of the status of Ukrainians in Poland. He really does deep dives into their situation, into the Polish perceptions of them. It turns out that about 20% of the Ukrainians currently in Poland, because usually a successful immigration policy is premised on the potential of assimilating most, if not all, of the newcomers. Well, it turns out that 20% of the current Ukrainians in Poland do not want to assimilate into Polish society. And I'm guessing that 20% are the hardcore neo-Banderite element that happened to hop the fence from Western Ukraine to Poland. And these guys, you can see them sometimes on TikTok. One of the first things I saw, this was, I think, February 25th or 26th in the city of Wrocław. I was downtown driving with my wife, Kate. We were coming back from, I think it's shopping or something like that. And we were stuck in traffic in the middle of Wrocław. And a guy pulls up in front of us in a new BMW. It's got the Ukrainian national symbol, the so-called trizub, on his back window. And written in Ukraine, Bandera is our father. In Poland!
It's like, Poland!
You go to Tel Aviv.
That's going to trigger some people in Poland.
Now the thing is, the bastard wrote it in Ukrainian, so a lot of Poles could have looked at it and said, "What the hell? What does that mean?" But I'm not fluent in Ukrainian, but I could figure out pretty quickly by the letters in translated what was written there. It said, "Bandera is our father." I'm like, what the fuck? And Wrocław is one of those cities that, after 1945, as part of the compensation for what we lost in the East, the so-called, this used to be Germany where I'm here right now in the 1930s and before. Poland regained these territories. Wrocław used to be called Breslau during the, as we Poles call it, German occupation. I think Germans might have a different attitude, but that's for us to settle. But generally speaking, the people that settled Wrocław after 1945 were the victims of the Ukrainian nationalist ethnic cleansing campaign in current Western Ukraine. So I'm pretty sure if an older person in Wrocław saw that, he could read those letters, because Poles and Ukrainians, mingled in the 30s in those territories. They knew what that meant. And this bastard came to this city and has Bandera, our father, written on his BMW. And it's like, you want to, this is, I was saying
that's
to
like
myself,
an invitation to get your ass kicked, isn't it?
Literally.
This has been a Maverick Multimedia production.